Hi, welcome to the International Schools podcast. I'm here with co-host John Micton. John, it's 2 episodes in 3 days, I think, so it's a good effort, really.
Yeah, we've been really busy. It's been nice. And this is, we've been doing these panels, Dan, over the last couple years. Sometimes we'll get a group of people, and
Yeah,
those really are very popular. With the one on small schools and tech integration, and the one on AI got a lot of listenership. So it's always
definitely.
nice to have that expertise. And Dan's been very humble because we've been talking before about the topic, which is libraries. And Dan is keen to learn, and so am I, because that's often a topic that doesn't come in the forefront of tech and the topics that we talk about. But libraries are so critical and so important. And it's just so exciting that we have 4 librarians from around the globe in 4 different parts, time zones and everything. And they've just done a wonderful job of coming together. And we're really excited to kick off. So we have Tracey Fish, who is from the International School of Luxembourg, and Jaye Shaer, who's at the Western Academy of Beijing, and Kim Tai Dickerson, who's at the International School of Amsterdam, and Marion. I forget the name of your school because you just moved. You were in Senegal in Dhaka, and now you are. Just tell us quickly.
I'm now at Branksome Hall Asia in Jeju in South Korea.
Fantastic. So one of the things that I think over the summer, as you know, now it's the fall and we're kind of back in the treadmill of work and schools and all the responsibilities. Summer is often a time where people get to read, and I know that having been involved with libraries as a supervisor and a tech director, and working actually with a couple people in this room, and it was such a privilege. I always remember at the end of the summer how many thousands of books go out, just thousands of books, and the librarians do such a great job of encouraging kids to take books for the summer wherever they travel. And then in the fall, all these books coming back. Just the physical movement is always quite impressive. But I think one thing that, if we think of the advancement of AI and social media and the issues of attention span and TikTok and a lot of the creative tensions that surround people sitting down and focusing on one book, it seems appropriate and pertinent to really come and discuss this issue. And I really want to kick off with the first kind of area is reading in the digital age of devices. And, what does it look like in primary, middle school, and high school? What are some of the creative tensions in developing this kind of reading engagements and really ensuring kids understand and are excited about reading, even though they have so many distractions? And I'm going to ask Tracey Fish to kind of kick off with that. What are some of the things that you have observed, and what are some of the things that you're doing to kind of address those issues? I think Tracey might have frozen. Yes,
Yeah.
she has.
Does anyone else want to jump in on this
Yeah,
one?
somebody jump in, please. Yeah? Jaye,
I would jump in. Yeah. So I have to say that as a librarian, in the last couple of years, I've noticed that there are quite a few kids who invest their free time in YouTube videos and other social media ahead of reading. And we've noticed kind of a real reduction in the amount of students who choose to read in their free time. And so it's been an area of discussion in the last few years, and it's a real focus for us this year at the Western Academy of Beijing about libraries kind of trying to reinvigorate that culture of reading. And how do we really get kids, when they have so many options during their free time, to choose books? And one of the things we notice from the studies that we've read is that it really matters if somebody they look up to is a reader, right? Are their parents readers? Are their teachers excited about reading and talking about reading? Those kind of connections make a giant difference in how likely a kid is to choose to read when they have so many different options that they might consider. And so that's kind of the focus, is how as teachers and librarians we can get them excited about reading, but also help them to see that reading is a choice they want to make. And so that's really on my mind this year, really partnering with teachers in ways that we can connect with kids and show them that we are readers and that we're excited about books, and that we can be mentors for kids to keep them enthusiastic about reading as well.
I love that idea of having people that they respect or people that they look up to, demonstrating that, and having books available in the home, etc. Tracey, you kind of signed off, but we're so happy to see you again. And Jay jumped in to kind of kick off. Please share some of your thoughts, because I know you've done a lot of work in primary school with this.
Yeah, definitely, and especially working with parents. We spend an awful lot of our time in primary school really looking at different ways that we can develop a love of reading, a joy with reading. We do get a lot of requests from parents who have children who are maybe not readers, or don't read much, or don't read the books that their parents would like them to read. And so we've been doing some workshops with parents. We've been doing these for a few years now to just really get parents to understand what are the benefits of having a love of reading, and showing them some of the research and the outcomes of those benefits. But one of the key points that is often missed is when you look at all the data that talks about, you can very easily find all kinds of studies that show the connections between academic achievement and children who read, or success in life and children who read. But the key factor that is often missing is that it's not children who read, it's children who love reading, children who really enjoy reading. And so we spend a lot of time looking with parents at how we can really nurture that love. And there is a wonderful book called The Joy of Reading by Donalyn Miller, which librarians are very, very familiar with. But she splits down these kinds of how do you get the sort of hooks into children? What are the different methods that create the love of reading? So it's not just making you read for 10 minutes every day, or making you read 5 books in the summer holidays, but having children who really want to do that. And so her book is a fantastic resource for librarians looking to try and increase that. But connecting to the tech idea, one of the phobias that a lot of parents do seem to have is reading ebooks or listening to audiobooks, books that they're accessing through technology. And so we do show parents that as well. We do ebooks are real books, audiobooks are amazing, and if the key focus is to hook onto that joy of reading, however a kid likes to read, however they get their reading, whether that is under the blanket with a torch in the middle of the night reading, or reading on an iPad, or listening to audiobooks, or whatever it is, it's so important that they embrace that and encourage it and model it as well. At the end of the day, Jay was talking about seeing role models read. All the evidence suggests that in the home is the most important modeling that happens. So if they see you reading and enjoying and loving reading on your iPad at home as a parent, then that will be the same, that the outcome will be the same for them.
I think that's interesting how parents often associate, when a child is on a device, that even if they're reading, it's not considered the same reading as a book. And I have an anecdote where one of my children was on their phone a lot over the summer, and I was quite critical. And actually, then I realized, they explained to me that they'd found a hack to get their favorite novels and PDFs onto their phone, and they were actually reading a book. So I think that's so true, Tracey. Marion, what are your thoughts? Because you work also a lot in the high school.
You're on mute, Marion.
You're on mute, Marion.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
I was just thinking about that, because I know Tracey has worked in a primary library. That's correct, Tracey? But in middle and high school, I find that the challenge is to find the balance between free reading and the reading that the English teachers, train the students in analyzing literature and talking, doing in-depth reports on books. I've always found it quite interesting how there is a big difference between free reading by choice, whatever it is, whether it's a graphic novel or a poetry collection or just Harry Potter, compared to the literature that they get taught in English. And I found that the English teachers sometimes underestimate the power of free reading. I find I need to be careful what I'm saying because I'm going into a new school and they don't even know me yet. But so in middle high school, it is really important, I find, to make sure there is time for the students to actually go and explore that free reading. And that happens with the guidance of the librarian. I found it's always such a joy to do book talks, because if you do a good book talk, everybody wants to read that one book that you just talked about all of a sudden. Whereas if you didn't talk about it, it would just sit on the shelf and nobody would even look at it. Which is one of the great joys of promoting reading, I find. But you have to find the time to do it. And in primary, the students have a fixed schedule most of the time where they come into the library and that time is available to the librarian. And in secondary, I find the further they get, and I've got a real challenge coming up because I'm going to be high school librarian for the first time in my life. So I'm just going to serve grade 10 to 12. And that's going to be really interesting to see if I can find time to promote some free reading for pleasure, reading for imagination, reading for, being away from all the pressures of academic life.
Kim, what are your thoughts on this? And I think it's a really important point you bring up, having many of us have had our children go through international schools and through the IB program. And I definitely can attest both of my children did very little reading while they were doing the IB, because one studied history and the amount of reading they had to do for history was just phenomenal. And I think that they lost their interest because there was kind of this demand and this pressure to complete these more academic and required readings. Kim, what are your thoughts from your experience?
Well, I think that a reading culture in secondary programs, it's to maximize that love, build on the love of reading that they come up from the lower school or the primary school or the elementary school. That transition from grade 5 to grade 6 is a huge moment to keep that habit going. And as they move from the MYP, there's tons of room for independent reading. Grades for those are in IB schools. So the MYP program, MYP 1 through 5, especially in the personal project, that's a time for students to really expand in their interests and to really take on something of personal significance. So that can definitely incorporate reading. And what you're saying, John, about the DP, it's at that point where I am really reflecting on my own practice, and that it's not just the tension between pleasure reading and reading for content knowledge and expertise and knowledge creation. It's the function of reading in the brain. And what I have been doing and what I wanted to share today was I have been working with a research group. It started in 2018 with a post from one of my colleagues in Asia about the Marianne Wolf, who wrote Reader Come Home, which is all about the reading brain and how we need to build actually biliterate brains. We need to have a digital reading brain, and we need to also have a print or a deep reading brain. And how can we build that into our students? How can we build that into our curricula? How can we practice that at home? So I started working with the Reading Center at the University of Stavanger, Norway, with my colleague Anna Mangen. the University of Utrecht with my colleague Frank Hockemuller, and my colleague Naomi S. Barron at American University in DC. And we have conducted multiple print and digital reading habits surveys, both at the International School of Stavanger and now at the International School of Amsterdam. Naomi Barron published a book that I think is a wonderful text to support understanding what readers and reading is in our hybrid learning environments, digital, audio, and print. It's called How We Read Now, Strategic Choices for Print, Screen, and Audio. It has implications for classroom environments, teaching practices, and of course, budgets. And as librarians, we understand that we are constantly in a pull between digital resources and print resources. And what I find fascinating about the reading research that I've been undertaking with adolescents, grades from 11-year-olds to 18-year-olds, when you talk about concentration in a variety of media. So you have tablets, phones, laptops, and then you ask them about understanding as a separate consideration. The bulk of students will say very clearly that print is where they are able to understand and process information on a deeper level with more, it's less distracting, it's less overwhelming. You balance that with sometimes students say, well, print is boring.
That's interesting.
What I think is we lose track of reading as we move into the secondary and we start calling it research, and we don't even use the verb anymore. And so we have to help students have kind of a reading palette, is what Naomi Barron talks about in her book. We need them to, like Michael Pollan, I know a lot of us are familiar with his, about food, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And she has kind of configured one, read more, focus when you do, and medium matters. And so for digital books, the skimming and scanning and the speed, hyper reading, as opposed to what happens in print, which is more of a contemplative, critical, analytical, maybe note-taking, maybe annotating. Those kinds of things really help reading skills build over time. So it works perfectly with both content reading and free reading.
Great.
Kim, could I just would love to jump in there. I think this is a really key problem that we have as research specialists supporting teachers, because one of the most common requests that I get from teachers is to come push into classrooms to help students. Their research skills have not taken a hold, or they're struggling with the research skills. And when I drill down, very often it is not about research skills at all. It's about close reading and note-taking skills that can only really be fully acquired when they're doing the deep reading. And so I'm really interested to hear about that research, actually, because it really resonates with what I see on a day-to-day basis in the primary school levels.
And I think go ahead, Kim. Yeah, please go ahead.
Both Tracey, all of us, Tracey, Jaye, and Marion, talk about the role modeling piece of this, and that dovetails exactly into this. How do teachers role model reading within the content area? It helps with that deep level of content and conceptual understanding. Reading for speed is not about concepts, it's about information, and we have to maybe make that very transparent.
I think that's so interesting, the way all of you are kind of defining that there are different types of reading, and that they're, deeper reading, skim reading. There is a lady out of UCLA, Patricia Greenfield, and she's done a lot of research on skim reading. And skim reading is, if you think of your phone, you just get headlines and taglines and you just look at those, but you don't really click on the article. And she talks a lot about that, how kids are not being equipped for deep learning. So one of the things that kind of comes up as you are talking about this is this idea, and Dan and I have been focused on this in the different podcasts we've done, is the whole advent of AI and ChatGPT and kind of information literacy and misinformation and deepfakes. I mean, it's just so overwhelming and full encompassing. But I think in many ways, if I was a librarian, and I'm not, but I would be a little nervous thinking, okay, now I have some competition, or how do I navigate this, sudden presence of this artificial intelligence on devices and computers, and the idea of writing? Because I know many of you are doing extended essay support or research support for different projects. And Tracey just mentioned her working with teachers on research. So those are all aspects that require definitely deep information skills. I'm going to ask Tracey to start off because Jay started on the other question, then we'll loop back. But Tracey, just even in the primary setting, because I think that's where your expertise has been recently, what does this mean, suddenly having artificial intelligence present in the library, or is it not?
I think one of the things that came out quite quickly after this initial kind of panic that sort of set in across schools and libraries was that that really not that much has changed. And for me, one of the key areas that I kind of sort of safeguard, if you like, in my role is having children recognize citations, acknowledging the work of others, etc. And I think the IB has done a reasonable job of making it clear what their expectations are. And I think pretty much I feel pretty confident that we've got it covered in terms of what we expect the children to do when they are using AI in various ways. And there's a whole big question about whether AI should be used for research, or ChatGPT used for research, or using things like Elicit. Librarians have been using those things for a long time anyway. But one of the things that has really struck me about it there is a tension there, is we seem to hold students to very high standards of academic integrity, and we make it very clear. There's a very clear policy. This is cheating. This is not cheating. This is allowed. This is how you can use it. This is the best way to use it. You can use it for this or different tasks. And there's a ton of resources out there now that are helping teachers and librarians use AI well and effectively in the classroom. But where I'm seeing the difficulties is actually with adult use of AI in a school environment. So we're happy for adults to use and not cite when they're using something like ChatGPT, but when we're really preaching to the children that this is what they should be doing. And so I find that quite interesting, but in many ways it's kind of just going back to the same old battle that we've always had, where we tell children you must cite your images or use your images from a database like Britannica Image Quest. Make sure you're citing them. And we really kind of hammer that home to children about academic honesty and integrity, and it's part of the principles for the IB. But yeah, teachers all the time are using images all over the place and publishing them everywhere and not paying any attention to those kind of ethical standards. So in some ways I feel as though, yes, there was a kind of a blip where there was a little bit of a panic, but I feel I personally am really excited about a lot of the tools that are out there now for us to use.
Nice. Marion.
I wish I could agree with you, Tracey.
Oh, some controversy. I like it.
Yeah, no, I'm really happy. I'm really happy that that's how you feel in your school. But the school where I've just come from, it was not a blip. No, I think the panic is still going on. We haven't been working with AI for ages, I think, because it only came out in November 2022. So it's been like 6 months, and it may feel like years. And as librarians, we may feel like, oh yeah, I know Elicit so well now. This is the thing to do with extended essay, but it's all so recent. I found that in the last few months when I was working in my previous school, the students were either not using it at all because they were simply not on the ball with this IT aspect and AI, or they were smirking about it and trying to hide it and didn't think you could talk about this with your teachers. So it was my role to bring it out in the open and get through the smirks and the smiles, and then talk to them about how you use it. And then, of course, there are the teachers who either panicked, and this is what you were talking about, as you know, in your case, that maybe was a blip. In our case, it was sheer panic, really, really bad, and still should be, because I looked at some of the assignments that our teachers were setting students, and they're simply not holding up anymore. They can't, they can't do these assignments because ChatGPT answers the whole thing in 2 minutes. And so. Yes.
Yeah, I've got an interesting thing to add to this. This is some boots on the ground live from yesterday. So we have a good friend of mine's son is staying, actually my godson, and he's at a school you would all know, an international school you would all know. And you know, he's obviously a good friend of mine. I'm good friends with his dad, so he's got no reason to lie to me or anything. So I wasn't going to pass the information on. But he said he's using ChatGPT for everything, everything, every assignment, anything he can do, ChatGPT. Oh, he said all his friends are using it for everything. It's interesting because, I mean, he was exaggerating because, you know, teenage boys can be a bit kind of, you know, like that. But it was interesting. That was his reaction.
But I'm using it myself for everything as well.
Yeah.
It's great.
No, it's
Why
interesting.
shouldn't we use it?
I did a master's a few years ago as an adult, and obviously, and I just before ChatGPT, and I know I could have simplified up the research process and everything, and I could have done my thesis in a quarter of a time, I think, even without cheating, you know, without like doing it the proper way, but just, you know, the speeding up all the processes.
I think students, it's a low-hanging fruit, isn't it? Because it's so incredibly easy to use. But I think once they've established and had some instruction and some guidance on all the different forms of AI that are out there, and realizing that something like ChatGPT is incredibly useful for certain things, but there are some things it's really not useful, and they have to really see it. They have to see the examples of the errors and the mistakes and where it can go wrong. And I guess to a certain extent, the kids are always a little bit ahead of us, and so maybe your godson's you know, that this kind of sweeping up has not started yet, but I would hope that it will soon. And then
I think you're right. I think it's a golden age of student cheating we're in right now, and the golden age is going to end quite soon. But I think we're in it.
Jay, you're in a high school setting. Some thoughts about this, because I think it's a very rich topic right now.
Well, it is, and you know, we as the information and technology people in the school have been exploring it a lot. And I think what we really don't want to do is to make it a culture of fear around it. What we want everybody to feel, teachers, students, is an understanding of it, an understanding of appropriateness of use. Exploration is good, and really just trying to build a comfort level of expectations. So we do that in a lot of ways. I mean, we spend time with kids talking about the ethical use of information. Where might AI tools be used appropriately? Where might they be undermining what the teacher's hoping to understand and measure in students' abilities? We try to educate the teachers so they feel comfortable with all kinds of tools they could explore with kids and use with kids, because we don't want to pretend it doesn't exist. The truth is, these tools are radically changing work and education going forward. So we need to help people adapt to the change. And there are appropriate uses, and we want kids to understand when they're using it inappropriately in a deceptive and tricky manner. So extended essays are a really good example of this research. There's a lot of great AI tools that I've been exploring with kids in the last year that have been really, really useful. the obvious one we're talking about at the front end was Elicit, which was a really good tool for helping students create good research questions and start the research process. Really interesting, engaging. As a matter of fact, I'd say kids had some of the best research questions I've seen because they had tools that helped refine them and develop them, but also great tools that interact with journal articles and help explain the complicated parts that kids really don't understand, especially in international schools where a lot of them don't have English as a first language, trying to build understanding that they then know appropriately how to put then in their own words because they understand what they're reading and utilize it and cite the original source and all of that. So I guess what we're trying really hard educationally to do is diffuse some of the panic and build comfort levels so that we can continue to explore the tools in ways that they're meaningful and useful for kids, but also help them to make good judgment calls about when it's inappropriate to use certain tools and when it would be more appropriate to use them.
And I think that balanced approach, and also I think so often if we're not providing that professional development aspect, everybody's kind of going in a bit blind and it's hit or miss or trying. And kids, of course, if they put a question and they get, a page and a half of answers, they're good to copy that. And then on top it says by ChatGPT and they don't notice it. There are just so many things. And I really, so nice to hear how having that very thoughtful approach where you're really trying to get people to be more comfortable about it, and this minimizing or damping that sense of fear. Kim, you work a lot with middle school students, and I'm just wondering, Dan, I assume your godson is in that kind of 13 to 16 age range?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just curious, middle school kids maybe have, it's a little more difficult maybe to interact with that because maybe there's less capacity to self-reflect on kind of deeper research, or am I just reading that wrong?
No, I think that middle school students were partying in the corridors in the beginning because it is, and my son is 14, so he came home and tattled on all of them. So that's one of the benefits of the double-edged sword that is a faculty kid and a faculty parent. And I think that what Jay is talking about is exactly what the IB's take was. It was a take of, these are new sets of tools. These are not going to be prohibited. These are, right now, of course, in terms of age, terms of service, conditions of use and all privacy stuff, that's coming and going. Like Elicit has now added language for 13-year-olds on their site and their terms and conditions. I'm not sure how that goes with adult level decision-making or consent, but they're trying, right? I think where our first concern, middle school kids, it means then what we've known all along is that formative assessment in terms of the writing process, in terms of the reading process, in terms of the knowledge creation process is really, really important. And that takes time. That takes more time, I think, especially in the beginning when you're building routines, how to structure assignments and structure units and to assess learning in ways that ChatGPT just doesn't do it. What I love about AI, generative AI in particular, is now we get the design cycle. It's right. It's like what happened with tagging, with metadata. It's like everyone now knows what I'm passionate about, which is tagging things so that they link to other things, so you have more discoverability, you have more retrievability. Now we have that with prompt engineering. We have that with Night Cafe, surreal images that you have to constantly tweak to get your image to look like the prompt you gave it. We now have students reflecting was that the best prompt? Okay, what do I need to do? I need to add some keywords here. I need to say, act like this, do this my way. This is what I want. So that's all good. But I think it means we have to do things differently. And that's what I'm hoping for this year is the PD piece. John, you talked about that. Jay, you talked about that. And Marion, you were struggling with that. It's like, how do we level up our colleagues so that we're all having a community conversation? And Jay, it sounds like y'all are at WAB. What I like is that our investment in the Noodle Tools research management platform has really come to represent a great way for students to demonstrate their learning in a way that, maybe they're using ChatGPT to summarize an article, but they still have to then put it in their own words. They still have to cite that. And over the summer, Noodle Tools just released their update, and we'll put a link to it in the resources, so that you can now cite generative AI sources. Noodle Tools has also the team, Damien and Debbie are great. The Abalocks are great. And they're really thoughtful about the teaching and learning that goes alongside these kinds of tools and how we can take our information and be what Tracey was talking about, the attribution, simplify that so that we know and the students know that we're paying attention to that. And it's not wrong necessarily if it's appropriate and if they have cited their source and if it meets the learning goals for the assignment, the unit, or the student themselves. So, I think it's kind of like when Wikipedia hit. Everyone's like, research. Kids are all right, and we're going to be all right too. It's actually pretty exciting. They help me with subject lines on my emails all the time.
That's
There's
great.
There's a lot of productivity fun that will lower those barriers to using AI in the classroom if we can have more fun with it and use it to help our teaching systems as well.
And I like that whole idea that you're saying your kids are helping you with the subject lines. I think, in some ways, there's nothing greater when kids and teachers are working together and exploring together and sharing and having fun. There's that kind of collaboration that I think becomes very rich, and mentoring that goes on. So really, through this theme, one of the words that percolates up is professional development. And I think, one thing, as librarians, some of you have scheduled classes, some of you don't. But one of the things is every day you're interacting with teachers, be it a primary teacher that maybe is looking for books on a certain unit, or maybe it's an MYP or PYP or IB or even IGCSE or whatever program you're in. The librarian becomes kind of a critical center of knowledge, and also you have to do PD. The problem so often is, when do you have the time to do it? Do you given the time to do it? And what is the role of leadership in really ensuring that information literacy? Personally, my biggest fear is this misinformation, is the deep fakes. And already, it was so interesting the other day, they were showing pictures from the fire in Maui. And over 32% apparently of the pictures shown were actually not fires in Maui. They were fires in other places. And because they were more dramatic or visually more interesting, they were being tagged as Maui pictures. And then people were resharing them, not by a few hundreds, but by millions. And for me, that's the biggest fear I have. And I think, I'm not sure schools understand how much work needs to be done in that area. And Marion, I'd like to turn it over to you to kind of kick off this topic of professional development. What are some of the creative tensions that librarians face, and why is it that maybe we aren't focusing enough on this?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, your example of the fires in Maui, because that's mis or malinformation. It's not actually deep fake. And this happens a lot, that pictures of different events get captioned with something that it's not, but the pictures themselves are real. it's one of the things that I stress with my students all of the time, that the only skill they really need in life is critical thinking, and to everything they see, which is almost humanly impossible. I mean, librarians make these mistakes as well. It's happened in the past, and we were like, "Oh no!" But it's a human thing. You cannot be critical to the point where you have to question everything, or you just have to stop engaging with digital information. Um, I found, in terms of what's happened in the last 7 months, I found it was really good to start leading that wave. I found a lot with information literacy that teachers in the past always felt that they already knew enough. They didn't need the librarian, which was based on ignorance, because they didn't know what librarians had to offer. And when I saw them in their teaching, I knew that they needed a librarian to teach information literacy and to learn about it as well. But now, with the wave of AI and ChatGPT, I was able to actually take a leading role, because it was relatively easy to stay on top of everything that was written and said about it. And so quickly, people started to see me as the one who knows, which was great. So I was able to do a workshop where I found that, because of the panic, half the teachers were in a panic. A quarter was like, yeah, we know what this is, and this is great, and yeah, it's fine. And then there was another 25% who had no idea what it was. This is also quite interesting. You need to inform yourself. And so by doing a workshop live, we also all learn from each other. That as a team, all of a sudden we were aware of everything that's going on. So as a team, you start to think about, how are we going to change our teaching? We have to work on changing our assignments. We have to do this all together. And also some fear could be taken away. I think maybe Tracey mentioned that students are, embracing it as well, and not always in the most, in the most productive and academic integrity way. And so we are now the ones who have to help our students. Our students are not ahead of us in this, I find. I think they're behind. I think they make terrible mistakes, and which can haunt them for the rest of their life. If you cheat on an extended essay, and they found you've used ChatGPT, you can lose your whole IB diploma, and they don't even realize what they're doing at the moment, I think. So I think it's hugely important that we, as information specialists, lead our teachers and work with our teachers together to actually address this thing and respond as a team as well, so that the students can see we all know what's going on and we need to work with this. Like Jaye was saying, I think it's a great, and Kim said it too, it's a great tool, and it's with us, and we can use it in great ways, but we have to do it as a team with the teachers.
One of the things I think that is challenging for librarians is that often you have to push into the teachers. It's not like teachers are lining up to get your wisdom or asking you to come into their classes. Often you have to go kind of market yourself. Tracey, talk a bit about that tension of where you are seeing a need, but the need is not being maybe demanded, or not demanded is the wrong word, addressed, or people aren't reaching out. It's not that they don't want it, it's just that they don't have time. What is that tension like, and how does that manage that?
Yeah, I've had an interesting experience over the last few years, because I've been a push-in librarian on a timetable where teachers book me, just in time, not just in case, to do those media literacy skills. And I've also taught a discrete library program, which includes all that information literacy research stuff as well. So it's interesting comparing. And I think in an ideal world, the just in time, not just in case, is absolutely the best thing, especially in terms of you have, if I go into a classroom and I'm team teaching with the teacher, then I don't need to do PD and workshops with the teacher, because the teacher's learning along with the students, and the buy-in is much better, and it's really good for the kids when they're seeing teachers go, wow, I didn't know that. That one really, there's lots of really fun activities you can do in terms of reliability of information, and getting the teachers to work on that alongside the kids is fantastic, and it really makes them realize that this stuff is important. That's wonderful, but as John was saying, that then really relies on the teacher recognizing that they don't know something, or recognizing that they need to build some skills, and you don't know what you don't know, I guess, at the end of the day. But so on the other hand, having a library lesson scheduled and a program that you go through with every single child, but usually there's no teacher there in that case. So you are then you are skilling children up in a lot of media literacy using digital technology, and they are then more skilled sometimes than that teacher because they haven't been present at any of that instruction. So I have found it, it's a double-edged sword in terms of equity. I really happy that I want to have lessons and time with every child, but in terms of effectiveness and really embedding those skills into an inquiry program, it works better when I can push in and work with the teacher and the children at the same time. It's much more effective.
Yeah, that's interesting. Jaye, your thoughts?
Well, at the secondary level where you don't have scheduled time with kids, I think that a big part of my job is always finding ways to interact with teachers and kids. And that comes from offering myself up for every PD opportunity. If they're offering PD sessions, I'm in there, I'm offering something. If there's time in morning meetings with staff to give a little blip of some element that I know something about, I do that. I sit at lunch with teachers, just noticing what they're teaching and offering to come take things off their plate. I think that's how you sell yourself. You're always reminding teachers that you're there and that you know some things, some specialized areas, and can make their lives easier. So I can be in the room while they're working on research just as an extra body to go around and talk with students and make sure they're on track. And you're building that sense that people will spread the word. Oh, ask Jaye, she'll come, she'll help. And I sell myself to kids. At the beginning of the year, I said, I'm not one of your regular teachers, but every time there's research, I will just show up. And I say that in front of teachers so that they remember that I will show up when those kind of lessons and information literacy lessons are going on. And it's part of my job to constantly find those ways in, to connect with teachers who will sell me to other teachers, because I'm particularly knowledgeable about something that all teachers feel like they have to cover to some degree. And they forget there's somebody who will come in and help take some of that off their plate. But it's so much better for kids and for teachers when I'm there and I'm joining conversation, because I am the most knowledgeable about those information literacies. And it's good for all of us when I'm there.
Excellent. And I like the way you are having lunch. And I mean, I think, what you're saying by the anecdote of lunch and walking around, it's just making yourself present, and this, wherever they walk, somehow you're there reminding them of research skills, which I think is just fantastic. I mean, it's a lot of work. That's the thing. And it sometimes can feel somewhat deflating because you're always available. Maybe not as many people are taking up on this great resource and this, expertise that you've been describing to us. Kim, what are your thoughts?
I agree with all of my colleagues on the strategies that they are using, and that 100% embedded lessons with a meaningful task or outcome, and hopefully more than one, is definitely the best way for students to learn skills and to take on their roles as learners, rather than some kind of isolated curriculum that is just us in the library doing it, and it has no real connection to a unit or to an assignment or so I agree with all of you. I think that this year for me, I am going to be really working to find those moments in the school day that teachers are working together, whether as a grade level team, as a subject area team, as a middle school coordinators, grade level team, grade level leaders meeting, or a high school steering committee meeting. I'm really working with my team, because I am head of libraries, for us to meet as a library team during the school day, so that I am available on our Wednesday professional development or meeting days and our Friday mornings. Those are really prime time to connect with teachers. And instead of trying to fit our K-12 library program into those times, to really make a time during the school days so that we can be there when our colleagues are working together, going to planning meetings, watering the green shoots first, always. You know, Jay, it's like Mary, who's the secondary, Marion and Jay, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
make them so jelly if they think that I've gone in and I have created a library guide for them, which is, you know, a great tool to get students to role model effective resources and resource management and curation to them. If I'm going to buy books for them and they're going to have a cart of books, I mean, it's very old school, but given the print and digital reading minds and mindsets that we're trying to build in our students, you should see how excited the students get when here comes the cart of books. It builds, that excitement builds, but I need to go where the teachers are more. I have focused on students. Yeah.
I think that's so important. And I think that's, you know, what's nice is to hear that there's this commonality of the importance of doing that, but also the challenge of finding the slots of time and the airspace where you can do that in such a meaningful and purposeful way. As we're talking about this, libraries, you know, international schools are very unique. No, and one of the luxuries that we always have amazing libraries, because I know when I actually met Jay many years ago and we were working together, we were talking about how in the United States, librarians were being gradually, you know, not reemployed, or libraries were closing down in school systems, and that's often, you know, a tension is that libraries are a cost and there's a lot of overheads, and in some public school systems they're not as prominent because of these financial constraints. That might have changed, but I just remember that anecdote. One thing is that whenever I go into international schools, usually the most fun place to go is the library. It's usually a big room. It's got a lot of windows. There's a lot of activity. There are books. There's some technology. There are comfy chairs that you can sit down. And it's just a very warm, welcoming area. How do you think over the years, and all of you have worked in many different international schools around the world, and I just feel so privileged to have you all here because you bring so much expertise and experience in so many different contexts, cultural and geographic. How are libraries changing, and what are some of the things that are making you excited, but also maybe a little nervous? And maybe I can start off with Kim.
I'm excited about everything. I think that
Good, that's good.
I'm done. No, I'm excited about everything. I know that the work that we do in libraries impacts students' lives, not only at school, but at home, not only their learning outcomes, but also their identities. You know, I think that libraries have a huge role to play as a third space, a space that's outside the classroom, but it's also supporting the classroom. It's outside of home, but it is ideally a safe place where everyone belongs, where students can see themselves represented in every book talk. Students can see themselves represented in the curriculum. And the more international our communities are, at ISA, I believe we're upwards of 60 different nationalities. But what we don't talk about enough is the intersectionality of our students, how race, class, sexual orientation, how these religion, all the things that are who we really are. We contain multitudes, and it's much more than flags, food, and fun. It is, we need to understand not just what we do on International Day, but that every day in the library, students understand that they are recognized and that they can find a safe, compassionate space that is actively working to bring those voices into our collections and into our lessons. Yeah, and so that is what I'm super excited about. I am excited as a mom of 2 Ethiopian children, that their lives as Black young people is more and more recognized in the publishing world. I'm so excited that our LGBTQIA community is recognized. I'm so excited that my school in particular has really invested in print resources so that I can make that really explicit on our shelves. And when kids come in and they see that, it's the battle, it's the relationship that makes everything else possible. They're not going to listen to me about ChatGPT if they don't think I like them, or that they belong, or that they are worthy of respect. And so I think those relationships is what libraries do best. David Lankes talks about new librarianship is about your community, and that's your collection. I believe that.
Thank you for that. And I think it's so important, this idea that you brought up, is that if kids don't think you're worthy and you respect them and you have resources that represent them and that they can connect to, then how are you going to get anything else done? So thank you for that, Kim. Marian, your thoughts about kind of what are you excited and what might be some nervousnesses?
Thanks, because I really wanted to add to what Kim said. I totally agree. And I think the school where I come from was in a country where homosexuality was illegal. So as an international school, in all these different countries where we are with different cultures and different laws, it was incredibly important within our community to have resources available. We were like a little utopia inside a country where there were all kinds of terrible things going on. And within our walls, which were very high and they had barbed wire on them, we had a utopia of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We had a gender sex alliance. We had resources on anything you could imagine that would make the students feel, like Kim said, respected and worthy within the community. And I think that particular role of international school libraries is incredibly important in the different countries. Kim, you are in the Netherlands, is that right?
Yes, but I also was in Ethiopia.
Ah, yes, there you go.
Yeah.
So
I understand that.
So I find that as a librarian, you have a very important role to play to make sure that these resources are available, which is sometimes a challenge, but it's very important.
Imagine. And I think also what you're framing is this idea that you're in a cultural context or political context where the library is kind of an island, but on the outside that can't maybe happen. So there's something very powerful for the community if they can tap into that. Jaye, your thoughts?
I think what's exciting about the library is when students feel a sense of ownership of the space. What makes me excited is when kids come to me and have ideas and are excited about things. They want to create a book exchange, so they design a whole thing for that. they have an idea for a promotion for the library, and they go and create the display. I love that sense that that space is theirs, and they feel like it's theirs, and they feel like they can ask for things and ask for change. And that sense of community, that the library really is kind of a core place that they all have ownership, makes it such an exciting place to work and to be, that I can't tell you how many people are like, I love your job. I think you must have the best job. And I believe it. I believe I have a great, great job, that I get to interact and support teachers. I get to interact with and support kids, and that there's this beautiful place where we come together and share ideas and people can feel empowered. It's lovely.
We all want your job, Jay. Tracey.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. I have to say that my biggest allies, if you like, for making sure that our collection is very sort of DEI friendly is our students. So our PYP exhibition group this year just gone, we had 32 exhibition groups. There's a very, very big grade loop, but of those 32 exhibition groups, 18 of them chose to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion topics. And so they kind of, came to the library with a real kind of sense of making sure that justice was being done to these issues. And they were working on the auditing, and they created book collections, they did some ordering. They were I felt very good that they were very happy to come and tell me where we were doing a great job and where we were not doing such a great job, and kind of telling us what we needed to do next. And that's been really lovely, but also having them be involved in seeing where we hit those walls. So our collection is pretty good, and they would tell you that we're doing a reasonably good job with the DEIA collection development, but our checkout of those books is not so good. And so we're hoping to have the grade 5 take a lead on inquiring into why that is. What does it say about our culture and our community? But those things can only happen when your library is a hub, where it's a place where you can have that crossover between academic work and research and things that they're doing that's connected to their curriculum and their units of inquiry, and things that they're genuinely just interested in for themselves, or things that they want to do for pleasure. And so for me, that's the exciting time in a library, is when you look around and you've got so much going on, and they're all doing very, very different things with different focuses. And we've been so lucky at ISL that we've just got 2 brand new libraries built, and so we were able to have a lot of say in the design of the library, with that focus of the library as a hub and a multi-purpose space, and not being a book depository but being a real kind of heart of the school. So, and we are just now starting to see in the upper school, that library opened last year, and it was a magical transformation, really, in many ways. And the lower school is opening next week, and so we're hoping to see some of that stuff really taking off. But we already are. I mean, all of the new staff induction this week took place in the brand new lower school library, because the space has been designed to make it the nicest place in the school to do that, and the most functional place in the school to do those kinds of things. So that was very exciting for us, starting off the new week.
I think that's a lovely. I just think it's a lovely way of getting new staff to be in the library as the first point of reference when they come into a school. I love that, Tracey. Yeah, excellent. Sorry, somebody just said something and I interrupted them. Go ahead. No? Okay. So believe it or not, we've been talking for over an hour, and I am going to steal something from my favorite podcaster, Ezra Klein. He always asks his guests to share 2 books that they think somebody should read. And we'll just go with one. He actually asked three. And I'm just going to ask for one book that you think faculty should read before the end of this academic year. So I'm going to just who would like to start? Who has a book on the tip of Tracey, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm just reading at the moment. I'm going back to teach history in the classroom for a year, and I am reading a book called Empire Land by Satham Sanghera, and it's mainly a journey about Britain's imperial past, but it's become such an exciting revisionist period of history that that book it's an amazing read. But that book is now going to be informing some changes in the English national curriculum. So I'm very excited about that. It's a great book and I highly recommend it.
Great. Jay? I know I'm putting you guys on the spot, so sorry. Sorry, Marion.
So we're very focused on DEIJ ideas right now. And if I were going to encourage everybody to read something, I think I would start with Every Heart a Doorway, which is a lovely little novella, but it's about queer found family. And it's about people with very, very different world perceptions that manage to come together and support each other through adventure. And I think it's a charming and lovely book.
Wow, thank you. Kim?
I think that maybe they won't all read it all, but I think the chapters in How We Read Now, Strategic Choices for Print, Digital, and Audio is mission critical, especially with generative AI. So I think that we need to think about how kids read and why they read.
Thank you. Marion, we're putting you on the spot.
This is terrible. So you should have asked me before, so I could have thought about this because my mind's gone completely blank. But one of the books that I read that I thought was really interesting to talk about, to think about AI, was Clara and the Sun by,
yes.
I forgot his name. Was it Ishiguro? I think
It's about a relationship between an AI and a person.
A relationship between a robot, a serving robot, and a human.
That's right. Yeah, it is Ishiguro.
And it makes you really think about where is this going to go? Yeah, there you go. Where is it going to go? And the idea that fiction and reality is beginning to catch up on each other. And we're right in the middle of it as educators, because we're educating our adults of the future. They may be living like that in the future. So that's
interesting. In the last 2 days, Google has announced they're going to be releasing a DeepMind personal coach and therapist, so AI therapist. So Clara is more real than we realize. Anyway, Tracey, Jay, Marion, and Kim, thank you so much for sharing all this wisdom and expertise. And it's just such a privilege to have 4 librarians in the same room, because I know so often librarians often don't have a big staff, so you don't have big teams. Usually there are 1 or 2 or 3 people in schools. And I know each one of you have done such amazing work in your respective schools and are very active in the library groups. And I've had the privilege and honor of working with Jay and Tracey. So it's just nice to catch up again. Thank you. I want to remind our audience, our guests have done a wonderful job in the show notes. Go in there are links and all kinds of information. So definitely do spend some time and look at what are some pointers and some places they have encouraged you to explore further with the conversations we have. But on behalf of the International School Podcast, thank you so much all, and look forward to catching up sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.